There is no siren. There is no emergency broadcast. There is no soldier at the door. The restriction arrives as a declined transaction, a flag for unusual purchasing behavior generated automatically by a financial institution's fraud detection algorithm. It arrives as a quantity limit on a grocery app, applied silently overnight to rice, bottled water, and canned protein. It arrives as a fuel transfer denied at a commercial pump, a warehouse club restricting generator sales without explanation, a municipal fire code quietly amended to reclassify residential propane storage as a commercial hazard requiring a permit that costs more than the tank itself. Individually, none of these events feels historic. Together, they reveal the architecture of a system being redesigned around one operational assumption: that in a civilization built entirely on synchronized timing, the private citizen who decides to stop depending on that timing is not a responsible actor. They are a variable requiring control. And the infrastructure to enforce this already exists, already operational, already watching purchasing behavior in real time. The foundational misunderstanding that makes all of this possible is a misreading of what a modern grocery store actually is. It is not a warehouse. It is a transfer station. Most major supermarket chains carry between 2 and 5 days of inventory, not because storage space isn't available, but because just-in-time logistics has optimized storage out of the system entirely. Trucks replace inventory, algorithms replace redundancy, efficiency replaced resilience years ago. Under stable conditions, the illusion is perfect. But efficiency and resilience are opposing engineering properties. The more optimized a system becomes for normal throughput, the less capacity it retains to absorb disruption. Engineers call what happens next the bullwhip effect. A miner. Slowdown at one node amplifies violently as it moves through a chain with zero buffer capacity. A delayed shipment becomes a regional shortage. A regional shortage becomes a behavioral signal. And a behavioral signal, in a population conditioned to expect constant availability, triggers a response the system was never designed to survive. The 2021 Texas winter storm stripped grocery shelves within 48 hours. The March 2020 COVID shock emptied stores across the country in 72 hours. Peer-reviewed research in the International Journal of Production Economics consistently models retail food supply as a low-redundancy, high-coupling system with a narrow recovery corridor. It fails fast, and it takes far longer to restore than it took to break. This is the system that residential zoning law and emergency management doctrine implicitly assumes will always be available to you. The regulations restricting home food storage are legally mandating your dependence on it. What governments understand, and what most citizens do not, is that in a fragile supply system, the primary threat is not the disruption itself. It is the behavioral response to visible disruption. The public believes shortages create panic. The operational reality, documented in disaster response literature and in every major supply crisis of the last 30 years, is that visible panic creates the shortages. That distinction changes everything. When enough people simultaneously lose confidence in supply continuity, they shift from normal consumption to acquisition behavior. Fuel tanks stay permanently full, medications vanish. Overnight, cash withdrawals spike, freezers fill. Logical at the individual level, catastrophic at the aggregate. Modern governments are not primarily managing infrastructure during emergencies. They are managing belief, the shared belief that trucks will arrive tomorrow and shelves will refill overnight. The moment that belief fails simultaneously across a population, systems destabilize faster than any physical infrastructure failure could cause. This is why visible preparedness at scale becomes politically dangerous, not because stored food threatens authority, but because it broadcasts collapsing faith in continuity. Authorities do not need to seize your supplies if algorithmic systems can prevent acquisition before shortages become publicly visible. Restriction is far more efficient than confiscation. And the infrastructure for it, payment networks, retail loyalty programs, AI-driven inventory platforms that already track anomalous purchasing behavior in real time, requires only a Policy decision to redirect towards supply behavior management. The clearest illustration of how these restrictions operate, quietly, technically, without announcement, is the legal architecture around water collection and residential energy storage. Water rights law in the American West operates on prior appropriation doctrine, meaning surface water and groundwater is legally owned not by the person on whose land it falls, but by whoever holds the senior water right. Colorado did not legalize residential rainwater collection until 2016, and then only to 110 gallons per household. Survival physiology requires 1 gallon per person per day under mild conditions, double under heat stress. In a grid-down scenario, which FEMA's own hazard models indicate will occur within 24 to 72 hours of a major grid failure as water treatment plants lose power, a family of 4 needs a minimum of 30 gallons per week just to survive. The gap between 110 gallons legally permitted and multi-week survival requirements is not an oversight. It is structural dependency encoded into law. Energy storage follows the same pattern. The National Electrical Code, as adopted across most U.S. jurisdictions, requires battery storage systems above roughly 20 kilowatt-hours, approximately 1 day of average household consumption, to meet commercial-grade permitting and fire suppression requirements that are economically prohibitive for most homeowners. The practical outcome: legally permissible residential energy storage in most of the country is insufficient to sustain a household through a 5-day grid outage. Precisely the scenario the Department of Energy's own grid resilience assessments identify as high probability during a major weather event or infrastructure cyber attack. What this convergence demands is preparation redesigned around quiet resilience rather than visible accumulation. The basement packed floor to ceiling with labeled bins is not just impractical. It is now a legal and financial exposure that can be activated by a neighbor complaint, a routine insurance inspection, or an algorithm flagging purchasing velocity. The strategic response is layered storage distributed across multiple classification categories to avoid commercial thresholds, water systems configured within residential plumbing code, energy storage sized below permitting thresholds while still providing meaningful autonomy, and acquisition patterns distributed across time and location to avoid behavioral anomaly flags. Skills generate no purchase record, require no permit, and cannot be algorithmically restricted, which makes them more strategically valuable than gear in this environment. Water purification capability is more defensible than bottled water. Inventory. Medical knowledge creates less exposure than a pharmaceutical stockpile. Energy efficiency, the ability to dramatically reduce household consumption during crisis, is more durable than fuel dependence, which is subject to rationing, precisely when it is most needed. Legal literacy is now a survival skill. Municipal zoning codes, state water rights statutes, and local electrical code thresholds need to be read, not blog post summaries of them, before any serious investment is made. The direction of travel across all of these regulatory domains is consistent, and it is not toward expanding individual capacity. The insurance industry is writing increasing exclusions for homes with large fuel storage, unconventional water systems, and off-grid electrical setups, exclusions that void coverage at the exact moment a claim is most likely to be filed. The FEMA Community Lifelines Framework, which now governs federal emergency response doctrine, explicitly organizes disaster response around centralized distribution points, built on an assumption of individual dependency that emerging regulations are encoding as a legal baseline. Temporary restrictions introduced during acute crises become permanent administrative infrastructure. The preparation phase ends when the restriction phase becomes publicly visible. By the time quantity limits appear on the grocery app, by the time the fuel transfer is denied, by the time the permit requirement materializes into an enforcement action, the window has already closed. Modern civilization is not built on abundance. It is built on timing. And the moment enough of those synchronized systems drift out of alignment, the regulatory response will not prioritize your independence. It will prioritize restoring the Order that makes everyone else's dependency manageable. No sirens, no announcements. Just quiet restrictions, delayed transactions, and the slow realization that the system was redesigning itself around you.